Welcome to the Gay Men Going Deeper podcast, a podcast by the Gay Men's Brotherhood, where we talk about everything personal development, mental health, and sexuality. I'm your host today, Matt Lancedow, and we are joined by Devante Love. Welcome, Devante.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is a beautiful platform, and I'm honored to be here, so thank you.
Yeah, we're honored to have you here. Excited to pick your brain today. Today, we're going to be talking about authenticity through embodiment. So we're going to be breaking down, Devante and I are going to be sharing our what authenticity and embodiment means to us and how we can start to practice both of these things. So we're going to be unpacking questions like, what does authenticity mean to each of us? What does embodiment mean to each of us? What is the connection between the body, our thoughts, and our emotions? Why is it important for gay men in the 21st century, especially, to engage in embodiment practices? Forces that exist in society that have and can cause us to become disembodied, such as capitalism, technology, colonialism, and religion. I'm very excited about unpacking that question. I got a lot to say on that one. How do we become more embodied? And the importance of developing a lexicon for bodily sensations. So yeah, this is just right up my alley. I bring up the word embodiment in all the podcasts, and I don't think people quite understand. So I was really looking forward to having you on here so we could unpack it, so people could know what I mean when I drop that bomb. But before we begin, I want to introduce you, because you're doing a lot of really beautiful things in this world, and I want everybody to know about it. So
yeah.
Yeah. So Devante Love, they, them, is a gay Olympian, Kung Fu master, QTBIPOC counselor, and shaman who has over a decade of experience guiding thousands of folks from across the world who have felt weighed down by their trauma, anxiety, stress, or culture. They are the founder of Healing Kung Fu, an online queer and BIPOC-friendly spiritual martial arts school, which teaches people how to attain new levels of wellness through movement meditation practices. After getting their master's in spiritual psychology from Columbia University, they were invited to train, teach, and compete all over the US and internationally. They're currently pursuing a doctorate in performance studies, where they are working to curate interactive healing performances that help people connect to their true nature and heal from mental, emotional health blocks so that they feel empowered to live into their destiny. There's no better person, in my opinion, to come on and talk about this. So yeah, welcome again. It's really good to have you here. And
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just as you said, I think we'll get into this, but embodiment is something that not many people even know of or understand. And it's something that's changed my life, becoming more embodied. So I'm really excited to share some of my story and experience, and hopefully that helps people understand the importance, or I would say necessity, of being more in touch with the body. So I'm ready for this roller coaster.
Yeah, we're at a very similar place in our journey, I think. And I don't know a lot about you. We're just getting to know each other now, but I feel like a lot of our stories kind of similar, and I'm actually looking forward to learning more about your story. So why don't we start there? Actually, I'd love to know, like, maybe your origin story, kind of what's the what brought you to this work, what brought you to this place in your life where you're practicing embodiment?
Yeah. So my entire life, I've been very athletic. When I was younger, I did tap dance, and I quit tap dance because I advanced so quickly that I ended up getting into these classes with all girls, and I felt like I don't belong in this particular space. I was like maybe 6 or 7 at that point, so I was very young. And so I quit that, and then I jumped between different sports. I did like soccer, soccer meaning like actual like soccer, like European soccer. So football. And then I did like baseball, I did basketball, I did so many different sports. And I found that when I was moving my body, all these voices in my head were sort of silenced, or I was able to find a sense of calmness. And it wasn't until maybe high school that I started doing martial arts particularly. And I started doing it because I was being bullied. And I had come out to my parents, and they had said that they wanted me to have a means to protect myself. So they found this martial arts school. I went there, I auditioned, I got in and I started training. And the more I trained, the more I learned a system of tuning into the body and ways of movement that helped me understand what it is that I truly desire and who I am. And it felt really, really good. So I just kept doing it and doing it. Started competing in competitions and then started teaching. And it's been, I think this is my 16th year of martial arts training. It's changed like the way that I stand, the way that I breathe, even just the way that I respond to people. I'm a lot more, if you're tuning in through audio, you can't really see, but I use my hands a lot because, you know, I communicate with my body in that way. And martial arts has been the key for that. So I'm very grateful for those practices. Again, it's saved my life. It's given me a new way of being and a new way of communicating with the world.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your path, what led you to this, and I'm sure we'll hear more throughout the episode here as we go. But okay, let's break down the word authenticity, because you and I we did meet before this to kind of come up with a topic and what we wanted to unpack together, and we both agreed that authenticity is kind of a buzzword. Right now. My brand is all built around authenticity, so I understand it very well, but it's like it's kind of this word that people throw around, and I just think it's important for the context of this podcast that we define it in the context to which we mean it, right? So I'll start actually. So I would say for me, authenticity is the expression of alignment. That's kind of how I define it. And when I say alignment, I mean alignment to what is real and genuine to us. And I think oftentimes we hide our authentic self because there's shame or there's fear around bringing those parts of ourselves forward. And I think those parts are like more of our shadow selves, right? These parts are maybe our shortcomings or the parts that aren't socially acceptable to bring forward. So we hide parts of ourselves. And I think when we're being authentic, we're integrated with our shadow and our light, and we've brought it in, we've integrated into one being, and we're just being authentic to our, like the alignment and the expression of who we are. So I would say that's probably the best way to define it for me. What about for you?
I love that. Whenever I think of authenticity, I try to center it around desire. And I feel like authenticity is the way that we express our specific desires. And we all desire things differently. You know, we desire to wear something, we desire to talk a certain way or move in a certain way. And because of that, authenticity is a practice of shedding away the layers of what people tell us we should do to realize what it is that we truly desire, like what sparks us, what makes us feel good or bad, and then choosing to act in the world in that way due to that desire. So I would say authenticity is a deep, it's a practice of constant recalibration toward our desires and finding ways to be in our desires within the world. So I completely agree with the way that you've broken it down. And I just want to add that little bit about desire, because it's really important.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, I like that a lot, because I think we often, like, again, you come back to what's real and genuine to us. Well, if we desire to be something that isn't socially acceptable or that people would shame us for being, such as being gay, right? The desire to be our authentic self is like one of the most humanistic desires, right? We want to be able to show up in the world and be who we are and desire what makes us feel good. So I love that. I love that we can kind of blend those two definitions together and come up with this really juicy definition. So, okay. So what about embodiment? Why don't you start with this one? What does embodiment mean to you?
Yeah. I would say embodiment is a set of practices or way or modality or ideology for putting the body first. So centering the body in all situations, whether you're in relation with someone or you're in an activity or you're just like, by yourself. Embodiment is the focus of the body and and allowing yourself to gain new awareness of yourself because you've centered the body. And we'll talk about this, I guess, but oftentimes in society we're so disembodied, we're so removed, and we're not told to think about the body, or we don't naturally check in with the body itself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are in this field of embodiment, it's really about understanding, like, how does my body react to this situation? Thinking of your body as like not just a separate entity, but like a part of you, mm-hmm. and realizing its reaction and its response to the stimuli of the world.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. My definition is kind of similar. So I use it, I would say when I use the word embodiment and I'm using it more loosely, I'm talking about kind of the definition of what you just said. So having a connection to our body, having body awareness, understanding maybe using our body for our compass, right? Our body is communicating to us constantly, and being in touch with that communication would be embodiment to me. But I think of it also as like, we have these kind of chambers that make up who we are, like the mind, body, and the spirit. And I think when we are embodied, we are allowing all three of those to work in harmony together for our highest good. And I think that's, when you take embodiment to the next level, I think that's, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm really learning how to bring in my spirit, bring in my mind, and bring in my body, and allow them to all work together. Because for most of my life, they've been opposing each other, especially my mind and my body. They've been at war. And now I'm learning how to bring them into integration and working together. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, a lot of people have that war, whether the spirit and the body are disconnected, or I think for most people, the mind and the body are disconnected.
Yeah.
And what's unfortunate is people don't even realize that they're at war until they get like drastically sick or something happens and the body's like, give me attention.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I love about the body is that it's relentless. If it wants attention, it's going to like force you to pay attention. So you can ignore the body and be so focused on, your mindset and these thoughts that you have. And eventually the body's like, well, I'm going to get sick, or I'm going to like fail in some way. And then you have to completely focus on the body, So yeah, I love the explanation as well. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying too. I think that's been my journey, has been my mind has been bullying my body to do all sorts of things, to perform, to overwork out, to eat certain things. And it's just like, I'm now learning embodiment by listening, just truly just listening. That's my embodiment practice. Listen to my body. What does my body want? And learning how to honor that, instead of like, for example, like I'm learning how to nap like for the first time in my life. Okay. And it's so amazing. Like rest is so amazing. And but for most of my life, my body wanted to rest and nap and my mind wouldn't allow it. Right. So that's a perfect example of like when we say we're at war with ourselves, or we're bullying our body, it's just simply not listening. It's ignoring the whispers that the body, and the whispers suddenly turn into like, screams and yells. It's like, and we get disease and injuries and these sorts of things. So the body will always win. That's what I always say, right?
It will at some point, and maybe at the point where it's too late. And then the body's like, okay, I've completely taken over. And then I would say for myself, there have been points where my body would literally shut down. Like I have a specific memory of when I was training in China. I lived in China for about 4 years, and I trained in martial arts there. And there was one point where I was just so in my head about like what it is that I needed to do, who I should be listening to, how I should be comporting myself in these situations with different people. Because I'm in a culture that I'm familiar with, but it's very different from what I'm used to. And I just kept like being in my head. And I remember one point I got out of the subway and my body was like, nope. And I just like fell down to the ground. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Nothing was wrong with me health-wise, but my body was being so ignored. And at that point, I was like, okay, I cannot not listen to my body at this point. Because it communicates a lot to us. And I think we're gonna talk about this, which is beautiful, but the body tells you exactly what it is that it needs. And when you tune into that need, you find the ways in which your thinking changes or your emotional states start to change. And it's a beautiful, difficult practice that requires patience and requires a slow, attentive quality, which
Yeah.
which is hard to do in this society where things are so fast paced and go, go, go all the time. So embodiment is somewhat of it's sort of an activist way of being, because you're sort of being opposite toward the ways in which culture is oriented.
Yeah, beautifully said, beautifully said. You know, and it brings us to the question about things that cause disembodiment, right? Technology. I think that's huge. It's so huge because we live in a culture where everything is you know, instantly gratified. Impulsivity is a common trait amongst human beings now, right? And the body doesn't work like that. The mind works like that. That's why I think a lot of us have an over-identification with mind, and it's things like capitalism and technology that have really reinforced that. So, but I'm jumping ahead of myself here.
Well, I would say wherever the body wants to go, that's where
Yeah,
we can go.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so the first question we have is, what is the connection between the body, our thoughts, and our emotions?
Yeah. So from an energetic standpoint, because I teach a lot about spirituality, so I can say it from an energetic standpoint and a psychological standpoint. So from an energetic standpoint, we have different frequencies or vibrations around us. And the most surface level vibration is the body itself. It's the physical. And then, you know, beyond that, we have the mental, and then we have the emotional. And so whatever's happening within the body is going to reverberate across these different fields. So if I'm feeling a pain in like my kidney, and I allow myself to tune into that, I realize that there's thoughts that are associated to that. Usually thoughts around like worthiness or unworthiness, whether or not you belong in a certain space. And then once you start to tune into those thoughts, there's emotions that are associated with that. So maybe there's anger because you've never felt like you belong in a certain space. Maybe there's just sadness because you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel worthy within a specific context. And so there's a deep correlation between the three. And it's very interesting when you start to do like embodiment work, you start to realize exactly how one influences the other two. And even, you know, people talk about changing their emotional states. And the way that you do that honestly and truly and fully is tuning all the way down to the most surface level is the body, and shifting the way you move or shifting your connection or relation to the body. And that changes the way that you think about things, and it changes the way that you feel about a certain situation. So it's a direct correlation, and you know, each of them speak to each other. And again, it's really unfortunate how they're so disconnected. There's different modalities of therapy which I've trained in and I've done, which I didn't really connect with very well because it's so on the mental level of just changing the thought. I can change the thought, but my body is still going to ache, or that emotion is going to still be pervasive and still come within me. So we need to really look at these things on all three levels, and that's when true change and transformation happens.
Yeah, that's bang on. And I think, you know, I get the sense we both practice similarly because, you know, I'm trained in CBT. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm also trained in dialectical behavioral therapy. And DBT is a little bit more trauma informed, but CBT is definitely not trauma informed. And that's where I struggle. And I always, for my own journey, you can't heal trauma by intellectualizing, by moving through the mind, right? Trauma does not live in the mind. The stories of trauma live in the mind, but the trauma itself lives in the body. And I think for me, I experienced trauma as a child, and what happened was I learned how to dissociate. I learned how to get out of my body because it was too intense. I took refuge in my mind, and I spent most of my life in my mind. And it becomes exhausting, and it's like you're literally running in a hamster wheel when you're trying to heal from your mind. And so, you know, how I would answer this question is that if we want to connect with our emotions, we need to be embodied. We truly need to be embodied. And especially if we want to connect to our emotions for a healing purpose, for example, healing trauma or working with shame wounding, we really need to be embodied for this practice. And, this is the last 3 years of my life is learning present moment awareness, learning embodiment. And guess what happened from starting to practice these things? I healed my trauma. I connected to my divine feminine. All of these beautiful things that happen through the practice of embodiment it's been life-changing for me. And so yeah, hopefully I answered the question. What is the connection between body and thoughts? I think
I definitely think you did. And I think to add to that, there's so much that's happening within the world, and we're sponges, whether we're aware of it or not. You walk down the street and you're absorbing the sounds of the street. You're absorbing those billboards that you're seeing. And so much of that is being seeped into your system, and your body stores it all. We are pieces of nature, we're aspects of nature, and we absorb everything that's around us. So it's somewhere stored in the body. And sometimes we're so focused on the mind and the things that we're thinking. And of course, we can change those particular thoughts. But again, everything is stored in the body somewhere in some way. And so it's not until we tune into the body that then we're able to realize the ways in which we've absorbed things into our own behavior and our actions. And then once we move through that, once we gain that awareness, we can then consciously choose how to move forward.
Yeah, I love that, because that's exactly embodiment right there, right? Tuning into that and allowing it to kind of guide us. It really is, the body is the compass. And I think, I always say, like, emotions are messengers of need, and they are the things that are guiding us to everything, to our desires, to our needs, to our fears, our worries, all that. Emotions are the compass. And when we're not embodied, we're not connected to our emotional body, at least not in a deep and profound way. And so we're not accessing our compass, right? And I think for me, when I started to connect with my emotions and feel my emotions is when I started to align to my soul purpose, because that's what my compass, my emotions, is what is constantly guiding me to my soul purpose, right? So yeah, it's just been life-changing for me to connect with this part of my being.
It definitely is. It's I'll just say really quickly, it's been the same for me as well. I used to be really deeply socially programmed in terms of like doing things in order to please other people, or just to make myself seem not like I'm problematic to the world and to the people that are around me. And when I realized I was taking on all of these social cues of like literally how to walk, how to speak, how to dress myself so I don't appear to be too frightening to other people. And when I realized I was like so in my head in that way, like I felt my body just be really angry at me for like, you have this need to express or be in this way, but you're not doing it. And again, around that point, my body started to fail. I had to have really weird like sicknesses that started to come in. Because we keep saying this, but the body will prevail. And if the body wants something, it's going to get something until you listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the body or the mind might win the battle, but the body will win the war. That's my experience.
I love that.
Yeah. There was something I was going to say, but it just evaded me, but I'm sure it'll come back if it's meant to be shared. Okay, so does that question feel complete for you? Is there anything else you want to share on that one?
It does.
Okay.
Feels good.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's bring it into the gay context. So why is it important for gay men in the 21st century, especially, to engage in embodiment practices?
This might bleed into the next question a little bit, but
okay.
We live in a time where, we're inundated with so much information, and information comes in different ways. It could be just the media and the ways in which we see gay men in different TV shows or movies. The news and the way the news is talking about queerness, or even like porn giving you sort of a step-by-step instruction as to how to please a certain person. And so we're inundated with all this information. And if we're not embodied, this information becomes sort of a recipe for how we exist within the world. But is that recipe something that actually tastes good to your soul, to your unique self? And I find that from my work with a lot of gay men in particular, like a lot of folks are disembodied, and they don't tune into their body. And so they go into actions that are are compromising their own personal desires. So if they desire, let's say, authentic, deep connections with other men, but they haven't tuned into like that particular feeling in the body, they might go to what culture or what society says is, authentic connection with men. And oftentimes that results in like casual sex, or it results in these sort of like baseless, sort of shallow conversations. And I think it's really, really important for us as gay men to take that time to be activists and listen to what the body wants and act accordingly. And the hard part about that within gay culture is unfortunately very, I'll just be honest, like it feels very cookie cutter. There's a lot of gay men who exist in the same exact way of, you have a certain body type, you do these certain activities, and that's what it means to be a gay man within our culture. And there's many different expressions and many different flavors of being a gay man. But I find the same thing over and over and over. And part of that is because people are taking on all of these messages, and that's what they think they need to be. But if we were to tune back into our bodies, we can realize like, oh, I actually don't like to have this sort of body type where I have this like really ripped six pack and these like big old muscles. And maybe that's not what my soul wants. Maybe that's not how my body wants to actually move about in the world. For me, that was really, really important to realize, because there was one point where I just felt like I needed to have a certain body type. And then I was like, my body wants to just sort of slip through the air in the most like precise and clean way. And having a really chiseled body with big old muscles doesn't allow for my own, in sort of a poetic sense, it doesn't allow me to do that. I feel like I'm sort of, blocking the air as it's coming through me. So I have a more toned body, and that allows me to kind of just like slip through space. And when I have this kind of body, it feels really, really good to me. And other gay men will critique me and say like, I need to do this, or maybe they might not be attracted to me because I don't fit this cookie cutter mold. But this expression of myself feels best. And I feel truly happy, and my body feels good. So I guess to sum up that long preamble, or that long aside, it's not an aside, that long piece, I would just say it's important for us to tune into the body so we realize what is authentic to ourselves, and we can have the courage, the honesty to express that in a society that's trying to still put us into these molds of who we should be.
Yeah, so articulate. Yeah.
I try. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. It's very stimulating to hear what you just shared, and there was so much going on for me. So let me see if I can kind of bring it all together and have my own little preamble here. Well, we titled this Authenticity Through Embodiment. So we're inferring that authenticity comes through the body, and it may be expressing itself through the mind, through the way we talk, through the way that we create stories about who we are. But I think it originates in the body. And I think a lot of gay men, not all gay men, have either experienced shaming or trauma in their life, or both. And I think those are two things that pull us out of embodiment. They disembody us. And I think that I fully agree with you that the gay community and the gay culture, in my opinion, it does feel very cookie cutter. It feels like people are trying to replicate this, what they think is the top of the pyramid. Everybody's trying to be this thing, right? Whatever. I agree with some of the things that you're saying around it being, this Adonis thing, overvaluing the white male, overvaluing the chiseled body, like these sorts of things. I think people are trying to replicate that. And it's when we try and replicate that, I do think that we're likely intellectualizing, and we're we're trying to access our authenticity through our mind by being like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be this, I want to be this, but we're not listening to our body. And I think that when we do start to connect into our body, like you said, we start to have the experience of the duality of our nature. And I think for me, I frame that as masculine, feminine, but if that doesn't land for people, it could be yin or yang. Like I have both parts of my being. And for so long, I was a gay man that was over identifying with his masculine. And I would even say at some points in my life, it was a wounded masculine. So I was over identifying with a wounded masculine. So I was trying to be ripped. I was trying to be a dom top mentality. Like I was trying to be things. And then as I've done this embodiment work and I've connected to my authenticity, I've realized that, damn, I'm not those things. I might have moments where I feel those things, but I'm not those things. I was attaching to them for egoic reasons. And I think now, like I'm like you, like I used to value muscle and being bigger, and I wanted to be bigger, and I was a fitness competitor and all those things, and now I'm like really embracing this supple, softer kind of like I like how you, that's why I said you're so articulate, because like the way you were describing it, I was like, yeah, that lands so well for me. Like just feeling into the way my body's moving now, it's a lot more fluid, it flows, like my movements aren't as rigid. So I do think that gay men can really benefit from connecting more with their bodies and with each other. Like in sex is wonderful, but I think even in more ways than just sexual, sensuality can be something that can be embraced to help us explore our authenticity. Yeah, that's the best I got.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Like I felt what you said in my liver, which is making me want to talk a little bit more about self-worth and being a gay man, being a gay person, being a queer person. We run it against moments in which we don't feel like we are good in this world, that we're not valuable, that we're not important. And naturally what the mind says is, if I feel like I have no self-worth, I'm not important, what around me is getting the attention? What around me is getting, all of that praise and value? And you see the specific look of, we're talking about gay men, so the specific look or actions or behavior of a gay man. So you see that and you're like, on the mind level, I'm going to replicate that in order for me to feel this sense of self-worth, or to gain that sense of self-worth. And people achieve that. They go toward that particular image. And what's unfortunate is when they go toward that image and they attain that image, they're getting all this attention, but there's still something that feels wrong. There's something that's missing. And then if they tune in, they feel it in the body. There's something that feels either heavy or really just like open or vacant. And I would say the reason for that is because they're chasing an image of who they think they should be, rather than finding the image from within. And that image from within manifesting sort of an outward expression of being. And I think it's a very difficult practice. It's a very important practice. And when you can do that, you feel, I'll say for myself, I feel really fulfilled. I feel like I can take a very deep breath and I feel calm. And when I go home at the end of the day, I say go home as if I'm like going out all these places. It's still a pandemic, but when I'm home and I'm just about to go to bed and I sort of reflect on myself, I can be completely happy with who I was and every action that I took. Because what I did is I took something that felt authentic to me. I might have gotten rejected by these certain people, but their rejection means very little when I love every aspect of my being.
Bingo, bango. I think that's so key. Authenticity can be very fringe and it can be very outcasting. I've experienced that in the last 3 years where I've really been fierce about being who I am. I don't care if the herd goes right. If I want to go left, I'm going to go left. That's how I've been living my life the last 3 years. And yeah, people shame you when you go left and they go right? And they throw all sorts of shit at you and they reject you and stuff. You got to be really self-possessed and grounded in yourself in order to be able to move through that. And I just think that maybe a lot of gay men struggle with being authentic and living authentic and choosing authenticity because of the fear of rejection. I think it's so strong for so many of us because we experience that as usually what one of our first core wounds in our lives is. We come to connection of that we're gay, we're different, and we feel rejection because of that, right? So it's like we do anything and we build our lives in a way that we're structured to not have to experience that again. So we might become people pleasers, conformists, any of these sorts of things that keep us stuck in inauthenticity and disembodiment, and I think and disempowerment, I think, as well. So yeah, juicy stuff here, juicy stuff. I'm loving it.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the big kahuna question. I want to allocate some good time for this one. So the forces that exist in society that have or can cause us to become disembodied, such as capitalism, technology, colonialism, or religion. What made you choose that question? Because you chose that question and I really loved it. When I saw it, I was like, oh, this one's so good. What made you choose it?
You know, and it's interesting, like right after you read it, there was like a pause between both of us. There was like this like very like quiet pause. And it's because, I would say it's because those topics are heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those topics make up our society. And so because these topics make up our society and they're causing us to be disembodied, or they're taking us away from our body, it just goes to show that our culture is designed in a way to disembody us.
Mm-hmm.
And within the mechanisms that I teach, I talk a lot about these different forces and how we can combat them, how we can, I keep saying the word activist. I think it's because I'm pulling in the activist archetype lately,
Mm-hmm.
but how we can be activists and like push back against these things. And first we need to be aware of what these things are and how they're trying to pervade our system, pervade our emotions, our mind, our bodies. And then once we realize that, then we can push back from the body. You know, I'm a martial artist, so I think about everything in terms of martial arts. And you can think about a block, how someone's coming in with a punch and you take the punch and you redirect it outward. And that's what I try to do with these different forces. So capitalism, for example, is I think one of the things that deeply disembodies us that we're not as conscious of. Capitalism tries to turn the body into a vehicle of production, of just a means of production. So if you're not doing something that is productive, if you're not doing something that's going to help you make money, that's helping you cross off the long things, the long list of stuff you have on your to-do list, then that thing is deemed bad. You know, you're deemed lazy. You know, you were talking, Matt, about how you learning how to take naps.
Mm-hmm.
I love my naps, and I will religiously like fight against, you know, things that try to take away my nap time. That's like crucial for me because my body needs rest. My body needs to learn and be reminded to move slowly because, you know, like I think of the elements, and earth, for example, is one element, and our body is earth. It's made of water, but I see us as earth. And earth is very, very slow. And when we are operating on this capitalist speed of like go, 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 we're going against our nature. We're going against our body. You know, we don't heal instantly. You know, most of us are not Wolverine. You know, we don't have this like magical, like quick healing ability. We heal very slowly. And so we need to think about, well, why is it that we're moving so fast if we heal slowly? You know, so I think it's important that we recognize the ways in which this capitalist culture is trying to make us move very fast, is trying to make us think very fast. You know, we're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook and we're just liking all of these things. And again, like, do we truly like these things, or are we just going and we're just clicking, clicking, clicking? Because the body is slow in its responses. So if I see this image, it's an interesting image, but do I really like it? I don't know, but I'm just, you know, scrolling through, so I'm just going to go like all these different things. And so I think it's important to just slow down. And capitalism says slowing down is problematic. It says you're a menace to society in some way. You're a rebel. You're not making bank if you're slowing down. And I actually find the opposite to be true.
Yeah.
I find that when we slow down and when we tune into ourselves and we move against this speed of capitalism, we're able to not do as much, but we're able to have more profound experiences. And that to me is really important. And the way we relate these profound experiences to other people brings us in closer connection. So I talk about eros a lot. So we're more deeply connected because of this. I spend time regularly just like sitting outside staring at trees. and staring at squirrels and what's happening outside. And people will say that I'm just like weird, or I'm not working. But the fact of the matter is I'm just tuning into like the nature around me and what's happening. And then when I go back into work, I feel a lot better. And this is why people take walks when they've been working for hours, that they need to take a walk. And that walk is refreshing in that way, because it's reminding them to slow down.
Yeah, my business has significantly gotten busier since I've slowed down, because I don't think I think the universe was like, well, we can't make you bring you more prosperity and abundance if you don't know how to rest. You're going to burn out, right? So it's like when I started incorporating things that were more slowed down, more rooted in my divine feminine, that's when the universe brought me more business. And it's just amazing that we're so trained through the capitalistic mindset that the rat race, right? We got to go. The more you do, the more you have. And that's not always the case, right? The more you do, the more you might have, but then the more fucking burnt out you are. And then you can't enjoy what you have because you're hospitalized you feel like shit, you got adrenal fatigue, right? And that's been my life story at certain points in my life as well, is it's just like, pushing forward with this masculine energy inside of me. And it's just like, it's a recipe for disaster. But I'm really moving through a lot of, I'm also bringing forth the activist archetype for the first time in my life. I've never given a shit about activism, and I really could care less. I'm very much an individualist. I stay in my own lane. And now I've been impacted by certain things with the pandemic that I'm like, you know what? I've really learned to speak up, and I've learned to value my bodily autonomy and my sovereignty in such a significant way, and valuing freedom in such a significant way. And it's made me realize that the way that our system is set up, and I'll speak specifically for an example about the medical system. It's set up in a way that keeps us disembodied. Because a person who's disembodied is a person who remains in sickness. And I think the medical system is it's a business model. It's built on, if you're sick, we make more money off of you, right? So I think that, you look at the way that allopathic medicine works. It's like you go into your doctor's office, they give you 5 minutes, and you tell them what's going on with you, and then they give you something to mask your symptoms, right? It's all pushing pills. And I just think that when we do become embodied, we learn how to take care of our health in such a profound way. And that might still be allopathic medicine, right? But we learn how to take charge of our health, right? And I think now we're outsourcing our authority, our agency, and our sovereignty to doctors, and like being like, here, take all of my power and you tell me what I need to do with my body. Well, when we become embodied, we know what to do with our body. We listen, we tune in, and we're like, oh shit, yeah, I'm eating too much sugar, or I'm not doing enough exercise, or I'm not doing these things. And we start to get this awareness. And I think for me, I've always been fairly body aware because of being athletic and stuff. But when you become embodied, it's like you become emotionally body aware. And I think again, when we have that compass and it's online, then we're guided to what we need to do. So I just think that, embodiment is also going to connect you to your health and allow you to take charge of your health instead of outsourcing it to a doctor.
I love that. You keep throwing out these like very pithy phrases that just like land so hard. It's just absolutely beautiful. And just as you said, like when we go to the doctor, a lot of us give away our autonomy toward this expert, this person who is trained in medicine in some way. This goes to another force, colonialism. And colonialism is one person coming into another space and saying, this is how you should be. And I think I look back into more indigenous cultures where they were deeply embodied, where they did things according to how their body needed. They had an understanding of not just two genders, of like 15, 20 different kinds of genders, different ways in which the body wants to be seen and wants to express itself. And colonialism has come in and sort of shut those things down and said, man or woman, these are these two ways of being. And then, wanting to feel powerful, wanting to be connected to this sense of power, will listen to this sort of dominating force. And so I think it's, when I think about colonialism, there's many different ways in which we've been colonized, to where we lose sense of our own body. And I think this kind of also connects to technology, but information also colonizes the body. When we get inundated with information, we think this is what we want. When I look at, and when I'm, the Google algorithm is very clever and very, good at making me think that I want something, but I don't really want it. I don't want that lamp. I don't want this special sale for this pizza place that's like right next door. I don't really want these things, but when I see it, then all of a sudden I'm having some sort of reaction where I feel like I want it. But when I tune in and get more embodied, I realize this is not what I want. So I think it's important to realize the ways in which, I'll say specifically now, information is colonizing. We're being colonized by information. And so this is why people take breaks from like social media, or they're very careful with what they're watching. I have friends who will only watch like HBO Max or only watch Netflix. And that's a way that they're trying to mitigate the ways in which information is colonizing them. So we have to be very careful with how we utilize technology before it uses us. And unfortunately, I don't think our brains have caught up to the speed of technology. Technology has grown vastly in the past 20 or so years, and the human brain doesn't grow that quickly, so our brains have not caught up to the speed and to all these connections that technology is bringing us. And so we're becoming disembodied. The brain doesn't know what to do, so the body doesn't know what to do, and then we're just sort of overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed, we're easily to be manipulated. And I think that's deeply problematic. So we need to become more embodied, slow down, become embodied, so we're not manipulated by all this information, by all the external world that's trying to tell us what we want or who we need to be. I'll just say very quickly, that's something I realized. I don't watch much porn. I never really have. But when I was younger and I did watch porn, there's all these little pop-ups that would come, and I had to click out of the pop-ups, in order to enjoy my porn time. And every time I realized these pop-ups are I'm like, I want this thing, I need this thing. But I don't. The fact of the matter is I'm in this moment where I'm trying to feel pleasure within myself. And then all these things are telling me, there's these beautiful sales and all these things that are happening. And I paid a lot of extra attention to that, because in those moments, we're most vulnerable. So anyone who watches porn, in those moments, I think we're most vulnerable to our desires, our bodies being colonized. So just be careful with the things that are happening when you're enjoying your me time.
Yeah, that's such good wisdom to share. I fully agree. Okay, we got about 10 minutes. So I want to get these, I know time's flying. I knew it would. I love it though. Yeah. Okay, so how do we become more embodied? I think we need to give some meat here, because I think people are gonna be like, well, damn, I want to become embodied. How do we do this? So what's maybe a couple of your favorite tips on teaching people how to become embodied?
So I look very closely to nature as my examples for how to be, because again, we are nature. We forget that, but we are. So what I tend to do is I'll go outside and I'll look at a tree, and I'll mimic the way the tree is moving. So I'll put my arms up like the branches, and I'll kind of sway in that way. And when I do that, when I mimic these aspects of nature, or I pretend to be a squirrel, or I pretend to be a dog in some way, it gives me a sense of how is the body moving in order to become this particular shape, and what sort of pain or what sort of ecstasy do I get from this? I think honestly, this is one of the reasons why yoga is so popular. Yoga puts the body in certain positions that replicate nature. And when we're in these positions, we have these profound insights of wow, I have not been giving my partner enough attention, or wow, this aspect of work is really making me feel uncomfortable. And it's because we're mimicking these structures within nature itself. And then it gives us a chance to kind of tune into, well, what feels good or what does not feel good to the self. So my first thing is to mimic nature itself, literally put your body in these shapes and move in a certain way or breathe in a certain way as something else, to kind of really understand what is authentic to you, what is unique, and what is good for you. So that's kind of the main thing that I do within my work, is like teaching people how to move in that way. There's something else that I would say is to work to become more sensitive. We're often very desensitized because we're overwhelmed with certain things, but we need to practice being more sensitive. And when we're more sensitive, we can then tune into and understand what exactly is the body trying to say. So realize that there's this like pulsing sensation every single time my boss says something, or realize that I feel like I'm being stabbed in the shoulders every time I walk through this particular grocery store. And so the more we tune into these different sensations, we become more sensitized. And then we realize the ways in which the world is trying to impact, or the world impacts our specific way of being. So I guess to keep it short again, to mimic the structures around us, the natural structures around us, and then contemplate how those movements inform the way that we want to be authentically, and then to sensitize ourselves and be aware of these sensations that are coming up in the body at all times.
I couldn't have answered it better myself. You know, did you know that I do a work in sensitivity?
No, I
That's
did
amazing. That's so my two businesses are, one is working with highly sensitive people and empaths, and my other is working with gay men. So sensitivity is something that I understand very well. I'm highly sensitive, I'm empathic, and I think, you know, learning how to manage sensitivity and become more sensitive, I think, is so important. And I view sensitivity in so many different contexts, but I think oftentimes people attribute sensitivity to like being hurt easily, but it's not. It's a perception and being finely attuned to yourself and your environment. And I just think that that's everything. If you want to become more embodied, become more sensitive and connected. I use the word to move towards more embodiment, the word groundedness. And I do a lot of work with tree energy, and I love trees. I've been obsessed with trees since I was a kid, and it's been one of the ways that I've learned how to ground myself. And through grounding myself is how I've learned to connect to my body, because groundedness means coming out of the mind, down into the body, down into the earth. And so I would say anything that's going to bring you groundedness might be earthing, you know, taking off your socks and shoes and standing on the grass or on the soil and kind of just feeling the earth. It might be hugging trees or anything like that. But oftentimes people come up against the mind, right? When we do try to move towards embodiment, we come up against the mind because we've been so addicted to thoughts and thinking that the mind is louder than the body. So we need to have a practice that's still that controls our concentration or our attention, because, you know, I think it's really important for us to learn how to manage where we bring our attention and where we control our attention, because the mind is going to be the thing that's going to be so loud, and it's going to take us away from being able to connect to our body. So there's something called one-pointed concentration, and it's essentially where you learn how to manage your concentration, right? So you might concentrate on well, what I did was I concentrated on counting. So just 1 to 10, 10 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 1. And when your mind wanders, you bring it back. So you're learning how to play with your attention, because I think oftentimes people think that they want to bring stillness to the mind, but you can't really still the mind, at least in my opinion. The mind is meant to be running wild and be constantly thinking, but we need to learn how to pull our attention away from the mind and into the body. So I do think that, you know, those would be my 2 tips. So learn how to control your attention through a practice like one-pointed concentration, and then learn groundedness. And then also body sensations, I think, is really important. Like yoga nidra has been such a game changer for me. I've had so many profound experiences by doing yoga nidra, which is essentially just like scanning your body with your own consciousness and attention. And it allows you to kind of really connect to the sensations of who you are. And those would be a few of my tips for embodiment.
And you know, to expand that, going back to like sensitivity, and to expand that, I think we're so focused on a couple of the 5 senses. So we're so focused on like seeing things or hearing things, but there's also smell, there's also taste, and there's touch.
Yeah.
And when you go into a space, have you smelled the way a space actually is? Have you allowed yourself to touch the different textures? I don't know if you would taste like the walls or something, but like, realizing you have these five senses, and if you utilize these five senses, you get a different experience. I remember I was at a theater because I do a lot of performance, and there's these I don't know what to call them. There's the curtains. That's what they're called, curtains. There was the curtains that were there, and I realized I've never touched those curtains before. And so what I did was I used my hands and I went down the curtains, and I used my body and I kind of wrapped myself in those curtains. And I had this really interesting experience of like feeling the texture of these curtains. And I'm like, wow, this is absolutely fascinating. And because I had that experience, every time I'm on stage and I see those curtains, it reminds me of that visceral bodily experience that I had. And I perform differently. I feel more alive and awake in my performances because of that. And so I think it's so interesting, and it's a really good technique to just tune into the five senses. And when I get into spiritual teachings, I teach people how to go beyond the five senses into other senses as well. But just starting to tune into those five senses in all environments that you're in really helps you be aware of the body and what's happening. And it also helps you to slow down as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think sensitivity is the thing that creates enhancement to our senses, right? If you are more sensitive, you're more likely to smell things more intensely, hear things more intensely, because you're attuned, right? You're able to tune in. So I do think sensitivity has many benefits. Last question, we have a couple minutes. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to speak on that. So the developing a lexicon for bodily sensations, I'm not sure what that means, and I would love to learn more about it. Tell me a bit.
Yeah, so I spoke about it a little bit, but I think, and I think, see, I'm already doing it. We as a culture and society don't have the greatest language for the body. We just sort of say, oh, that hurts, or that feels strange, but to realize there's all these words that describe how we're feeling. There's like words like titillating or like poking or stabbing. So like looking at these different words and seeing like, when have I felt titillated? When and where do I feel this sort of poking sensation? So just literally like, and I say this because I'm so into words. My undergrad work was in linguistics, and then I did like a lot of like language and power related research. And so when you have words for something, it gives you a whole new experience of that particular thing. So when we start to look at these sort of sensation words, then we participate in the world a little bit differently. I'm walking by Jack in the Box, and I feel like my arm gets sort of titillated in some way. And part of that's because I have like a really weird experience in the past with my grandmother and Jack in the Box. But I was able to realize that because I had that particular word that I started to use. And certain languages have more words and certain languages have less words, which is also interesting to look at. I feel like in English, we have a lot of beautiful words to describe what's going on within our bodies, but we don't necessarily utilize those. And so my point there is to develop your own personal dictionary or vocabulary for what your body is doing. And that forces you to become aware of the body and realize, when does this word describe how I'm feeling? And, start to ask yourself why. So that's more so what I meant by that particular topic. And I just think it's really important that's another way to practice becoming more embodied, is to literally learn the vocabulary words of the body and sensations. And I can share a list of those different words for people if that would be helpful. And it just changes the way that you experience the world, because now you have words to codify, to speak to what you're experiencing or what's happening.
Yeah. I love that. I love it a lot. We made it.
Yeah.
we were both feeling a little off before we started, so we're like, we'll just stumble through this together. So we did it. I think we created something really amazing here. I do want to point people in the direction of finding you, because I know you're doing a lot of work in embodiment. You have an Instagram, Healing Kung Fu.
Yes.
Your Facebook is Kung Fu Master 123, and if you want to find him on TikTok, you can find him at Kung Fu Therapy. I'm also creating a lot of stuff on my Instagram that's related to embodiment. You can find that at Inspired to Be Authentic. A lot of resources there for if you're wanting to move towards more embodiment. I'm just seeing if there's anything else. Yeah, I think we're good. Oh, and your website, healingkungfu.com.
Yes,
check
that
them out.
is the website. And just to add as well, if anyone wants practice with embodiment, I will start to have weekly classes, again, weekly online classes that anyone can tune into. So there will be information about that on my website when that comes.
Yeah, beautiful. I feel like the gay community has a lot to learn from you, and I'm just really honored, and I want to, on behalf of the Gay Men's Brotherhood, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us for the last hour. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'll for sure be having you either on this podcast or my other podcast again, because I really enjoy our connection and the way we create. So yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really enjoyable experience. This is a beautiful podcast. I'm again honored to have been invited, and I hope that people that are listening take something away that changes their experience within their life, whether it just be like, using more words to describe their bodily experience, or just the encouragement to listen to the body. I think that's really important. We don't get that in many spaces. So I hope that folks are able to practice embodiment and see how it shifts their perception of the world and themselves. So thank you all for listening. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can drop us some comments, because we would love to have your comments. And we do also read the comments in some of our reviews on the podcast. So please hit us up. And if you're on YouTube, you can hit the bell icon, subscribe, and we release content each week, so you'll be notified when we do. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast network, you can, if you enjoyed this, give us a 5-star rating. Spotify just introduced a rating system, so if you're listening on Spotify, you can give us a 5-star rating. That would be lovely. And thanks again for tuning in, and much love. Take care.